What's up, band kids, young and old? This is Russ, also known as RK Slade from Marching Band is Awesome, with another drum corps video. Today we're going to zip through 4 days of competition and talking about an exciting mid-season push by Santa Clara Vanguard and the Blue Devils. We'll talk about our current top 12 heading into the weekend shows, and we'll look at who is now knocking on the door of the 80-point club. Before we dive into world-class competition, let's recap the open class. Blue Devils B is leading all scorers this week with a high score of 65.750 on Sunday night at the Diablo Valley Classic in Pleasant Hill, California. This score would also place them just outside of the unofficial top 20 in world-class competition, beating out 3 of those corps. The Vanguard Cadets posted a score of 63.500 to take second place at the same competition, but scored over a point higher with 64.700 the night before at the DCI Capital Classic Corps Show in Sacramento. Music City rounds out the high scorers for open class by posting a 61.250 at DCI St. Louis in Lebanon, Illinois. This was their first visit to the 60-point club this season. In other news, we've got a very close battle for the 4th spot being waged by the Battalion and Colombians. Both groups are rising toward the 60-point club and have consistently scored within a fraction of a point of one another. In world-class competition, we had lots of action to keep us on the edge of our seats from night to night. If you were like me, you were spamming your refresh buttons to get those DCI scores each night. See my previous video about the 4 corps who joined the 80-point club on Saturday night. Since then, we've seen 1 more corps join that club, but we'll talk about that in a bit. On Sunday night, the Bluecoats put up a strong 81.800 in Rochester, Minnesota at the River City Rhapsody show. That was a 0.7 of a point jump from the previous night, but still not enough to push them past the Blue Devils and Crown, who had tied the night before with an 81.900. Santa Clara Vanguard was hot on their heels, scoring 81.000 at the Drums on Parade show in Madison, Wisconsin, and Phantom Regiment scored the 3rd highest of the night with a 75.700 in the same show. The Blue Stars have been steadily moving up from the low to mid 70s, and they continued that trend with a 74.250 for the 4th highest score of the evening. They took second place at the River City Rhapsody show. Some other notable performances came from Mandarins as they entered the 70-point club for the first time on Saturday night, and the Academy as they just barely missed out with a 69.500 on Sunday. Monday night brought us the Blue Devils holding steady at the Drums Along the Columbia show from Tri-Cities, Washington with an 81.900. That was enough to take first place in that competition and continue to hold on to the highest scoring spot for the evening. The Cavaliers broke into the 80-point club with an 80.550 as the Marsmen invaded Jupiter at the DCI South Florida show in Jupiter, Florida. The Cadets rounded out the top 3 in scoring for the evening with a 78.600 from the same show. The Boston Crusaders continued their push to get out of the 70s by posting a strong 77.800 for 3rd place in Jupiter and 4th in overall scoring for the night. Right behind them, the Blue Knights set their eyes on moving into the 80-point club, scoring a 76.100 at the Tri-Cities show. The Colts made a good push for the 70-point club by scoring 69.850, which is over 2 points higher than their previous score. On Tuesday night, we had 2 corps post up scores in the 80s. The Bluecoats posted an 82.150 for first place at the Celebration and Brass show from Johnston, Iowa, but that was only good enough for second place in scoring for the evening, as the Blue Devils just edged them out with an 82.500 to take first place at the Drums Along the Rocky show from Boise, Idaho. This was also enough to earn them the high score for the night. The Blue Knights took second in Boise with a 77 even, improving their previous score by almost a point and giving them the 3rd position for all scorers of the night. The Blue Stars earned that 4th highest scoring position for the evening with a second place score of 75.750 at the Johnston show.
Wait a minute!
Were you paying attention? Did you notice that the top 4 scorers of the evening all came from groups with blue in their name? The Academy crossed the threshold into the 70-point club with a solid 71 even at the Celebration in Brass show. Moving on to Wednesday night, we saw the Blue Devils fly out of the gate like a devilish butterfly. They have morphed from a 2nd and 3rd place scoring corps to holding on to the high score for the last 6 nights, even when they didn't have a show. They posted a first place scoring 83.900 at the Corps Encore show in Ogden, Utah, leading all scorers up to this point. In the 2nd position in scoring for the evening was Santa Clara Vanguard. They took first place at the DCI St. Louis show in Lebanon, Illinois with an impressive 82.900. They have also been a corps to watch as they have just recently jumped into into the top 3 with strong scores. The Cavaliers continue to come on strong. They scored an 81.500 in Atlanta at the Drums Across America show, improving by almost a point on their previous score to earn them the 3rd spot on the high scores of the night. Battling for that 4th spot in scoring for Wednesday night were the Boston Crusaders with a 2nd place 79.700 and the Cadets with a 3rd place 79.500. Both groups fighting to burst into that 80-point club. Right on their heels were the Blue Knights scoring a 78.300 with a 2nd place finish in Ogden, and Phantom Regiment scoring their own 2nd place, finishing 78.200 at the Lebanon show. The Colts stepped into the 70-point club for the very first time with their 70.350 show from Atlanta. Now let's talk about where that leaves us for the unofficial top 12 heading into the weekend. Before we get to the top 6, let's take a look at the close battles happening in the other 6. Fighting for that 12th spot, Mandarins and Crossmen are separated by just half a point, which means it's really up for grabs. But that's not all. Sitting in that 11th spot is the Madison Scouts, only a quarter of a point ahead of Crossmen, and only 0.8 of a point ahead of Mandarins. But wait, there's more. In the 10th spot, the Blue Stars are just 0.6 of a point ahead of the Scouts. That means the 10th through 13th spots are only separated by less than 1.5 points. The battle for 8th place is just as exciting. Phantom and Blue Knights are only separated by 1/10 of a point, with BK just edging out Phantom for 8th place. It's getting scrappy right around that 6th spot. The Cadets are only 0.2 of a point behind the Boston Crusaders. Both groups are just shy of the 80-point club, and I expect to see them crash through that barrier this weekend. Now, let's talk about that top 5. Like I mentioned earlier, all of the top 5 are now sitting in the 80-point club. Just 2.4 points separate the 5th spot from the number 1 spot. Coming in at number 5 with an 81.500, the Cavaliers have been steadily working their way into the 80-point club. They've improved their score by almost 4 points in the last week. Are you a Cavies fan? Do you think they have a chance of staying in the top 6 come finals time? Let me know in the comments. In the number 4 spot heading into the weekend, Carolina Crown was one of the first corps to break into the 80-point club this past week. Their latest high score is an 81.900. The interesting thing about Crown is they are still sitting pretty high in this countdown, but haven't played a show since Saturday. My guess is they'd be top 3 at least if they'd been in the lineups this week. They've been part of the front runners all season long, but I still keep seeing comments from folks who don't quite understand how their show is still scoring so high. What do you think? Sound off in the comments. Taking the 3rd spot in our unofficial top 12 this week are the Bluecoats with an 82.150. They had dominated that 1st spot throughout the early part of the season and are still scoring very high, but have slipped a few places as some of the other powerhouses are finding their stride. As they continue to clean their show, they will always be a force to be reckoned with as the finals near. Are you a fan of the Bluecoats? What do you think of their championship repeat chances? Drop a comment below. The skirmish for the number 1 spot is not quite as close as some of the other battles farther down the countdown, but still only 1 point separates the 2nd place Santa Clara Vanguard from the number 1 spot. Earlier this week, they moved up into the top 3 after their score jumped from 75.300 to 80.200 over the course of 3 days. That 80.200 was enough to land them in the 3rd place on the same day that BD and Crown tied to upend Blue. And keep in mind, that 3rd place spot was only by 1/10 of a point. SCV is bringing it lately, sitting in 2nd with an impressive 82.900. What are your thoughts on their show? Is it strong enough to win it all? That brings us to our number 1 spot for our top 12 rankings. Beating out SCV by a point with an 83.900, the Blue Devils have put up strong numbers. They are making a reasonable case for a championship run this year, and one that for them would be extremely meaningful for their 60th anniversary year. Do you think BD has what it takes to hoist the championship trophy at the end of the season? Let me know in the comments. So there it is. What a week to recap. Blue Devils take over the number 1 spot. Santa Clara Vanguard push into the number 2 spot. Crown breaks into the 80-point club, beating out the Bluecoats in the process, but without any shows, slip to the 4th spot. Bluecoats take advantage of that and hang on to the 3rd spot. The Cavaliers join the 80-point club, while the Boston Crusaders, Cadets, Blue Knights, and Phantom are all knocking on the door. Tell me in the comments how you think this weekend will pan out for your favorite corps. If you love marching band and drum corps videos like this one, please subscribe. And if you liked this video, smash that like button. I'm Russ, also known as RK Slade for Marching Band is Awesome. And as always, remember, marching band is awesome because you're awesome, and I'll see you on the next video.
The Cadets are only two tenths of a point. Oh wait, there's more. Now let's talk about where that leaves us heading into the weekend. Now let's talk about where that leaves us with for the unofficial top 12 for the weekend.